I'm here with 3 cats who've been trying to steal my chair, so we'll see.
All right, good evening and welcome to Ohio Wesleyan's own Bishop Plus virtual information session series. My name is Lori Patton and I am the Director of Admission here at Ohio Wesleyan. I'm also a graduate, graduated in the class of 1995, and I've been working at OWU in the admission office since shortly after graduation. Interestingly as well, I have 2 children who are at OWU. My daughter just finished her sophomore year, and my son, who's a high school senior, will be starting at OWU in the fall. So I have an interesting parent perspective as well. I will be the moderator of tonight's session, which we are calling Undecided and Undeterred, Advice for Students Who Haven't Chosen a Major. When high school students start to look at post-high school plans, I know that everyone asks the following questions. What do you want to study? What do you want to major in? What do you want to do with your life? And for some, you may know the answer, but for others, you may be thinking, I don't know, I'm undecided, and that's okay. In fact, routinely, Undecided is among our top 5 majors at Ohio Wesleyan for entering students. So if you're in that position, you're certainly not alone. The focus of this session tonight will be on exactly that, not knowing or being undecided as you enter college, and the ways in which our curriculum and the support provided at Ohio Wesleyan can help move you from undecided to a particular major. And joining me tonight is Dr. Linda Hall. Dr. Hall actually serves a dual role at OWU. She is our Associate Dean of Academic Performance and a professor in the psychology department. In fact, fun side note, I was a psychology major myself when I was at Ohio Wesleyan, and Dr. Hall was my faculty mentor. I not only took a few classes with her, but and in fact, I still remember a very difficult advanced quantitative methods class, Dr. Hall. But she and I also collaborated together on a psychological research project and paper during my junior and senior years. So I've been so fortunate to continue to have Dr. Hall as a mentor as I worked at Ohio Wesleyan in my professional career, and I'm delighted to be able to spend some time with her tonight. So Dr. Hall, welcome. And I wonder if you can start by telling our audience a bit more about yourself and your role here at Ohio Wesleyan.
Sure. I have been here since 1985. I was initially hired by another member of the psychology department, Harry Barrick. Dr. Barrick has been at Ohio Wesleyan for 70 years. He's 95 years old, and he had a grant from the National Science Foundation. And so he hired me to be the director of the grant. We collaborated for 4 years on a research project that looked at maintenance of knowledge, how well people retain and use knowledge that they've acquired in the classroom or other real life settings. And then I was very fortunate that just as that grant was ending and my job was going away, that a teaching position opened up and I moved into that. So I've been a member of the faculty ever since. For the last 4 years, I've been Associate Dean for Academic Performance. I do that half-time. And in that capacity, I do things like I help run the academic part of summer orientation programs. I do that in collaboration with people from the Division of Student Engagement and Success, our Student Life Division. I'm also director for UC 160, and that's the required class for all first-year students. And we'll probably talk about that a bit more tonight because that's a nice place to help you get started on planning your OWU curriculum and your OWU career. And then the other things that I do include I'm a liaison to the Sagan Academic Resource Center, which is where we have a lot of our academic support services, and I work with them to help them integrate those services into other things that we do.
Great, thanks, Dr. Hall. Before we get into the meat of the questions about being undecided, I wondered if you could spend just a couple of minutes talking about how the spring semester, particularly the second half of the spring semester, went. As you know, we just finished our spring semester. I think finals ended yesterday or the day before.
Yesterday.
And I know you taught 2 classes this spring. I wonder if you could talk about how the remote learning went and what you learned perhaps about yourself and or your students in the process.
I think it was a tremendous learning challenge for everyone involved. But what I told my students at the outset over our spring break, when we realized we were not going to be able to have them come back to campus, we were going to have to switch to remote learning, is that a liberal arts education, the purpose of it is to help students acquire transferable skills, skills that can be applied in a wide variety of settings and are really ideal for preparing people for real life problems. And boy, if we had our share of real life problems, so we put that to the test. And so that meant that there was a lot of learning on the fly by students and by myself. And so in one class, I worked really hard and came up with a revised syllabus, which kind of changed around the order of assignments. Instead of having a few big exams, I broke them down into weekly smaller exams, for example. And part of my rationale there was I had less confidence that I could set the difficulty level correct. I had changed the format of the way students interacted with exams, and I wasn't certain how that would be for them. And so by having more smaller exams, it gave me room to adapt and have it have less impact on their grades. And so we learned together. They gave me good feedback. We talked a lot. I adapted my syllabus a 3rd time, in part from what I learned. And I think we got through it pretty well. We've been assessing it numerous ways. We participated in a national survey that allows us to compare the results of our switch to remote learning with other comparable institutions. And on most categories, we came out above the rest. Students feel that faculty communicated well with them. They felt that they were supported in their learning, etc. Students, of course, had a lot of concerns. This was a very challenging transition for them. I'm sure people on this broadcast have experienced similar things. So I'm already telling you what you know. But students didn't sign up for online classes. And some of them were in circumstances where they had other responsibilities. They had a lot going on. They didn't have reliable and consistent access to the internet. They had to share it with other family members who also had challenges. So that was very challenging. But I think what we all did was try to be flexible. And so flexibility, communication helps a lot. That's where our smaller class sizes are a real plus. It's also where just knowing students well is a real plus. So I think all in all, we got through it pretty well. One faculty member shared with me earlier today that she put on her final exam a question and asked the students, where do you think you learned more? The first half of the semester when we were face-to-face or the second half when we were online? And a surprisingly high percentage said the second half when they were online. Now, some of them said because the material got more interesting. So that had nothing to do with the format. But a number of them said, after they got used to it, that there was a routine and they learned to manage their own learning a bit more, and that there were some advantages to that. So I don't think it was a loss at all. Our goal is always to promote student learning. And so we tried to make everything we did when we adapted in pursuit of that goal.
Great, thanks. I know you have some final exams to finish grading yet this week, so good luck with that. I'll remind our audience that there is an option to submit questions throughout the course of this webinar. There's a Q&A feature on your screen, and you are welcome to, throughout the course of our time together, to submit those questions. Some of you submitted some questions ahead of time, and so we'll run through those as well, but don't be shy in submitting questions throughout the webinar. So I guess, Linda, where I want to start is, this is kind of a multi-tiered question. So when students apply for admission, many of them list an intended major or 2 on their application, and some, of course, list undecided. What implications, if any, does it have, putting a major down or putting undecided down, have at OU? Are students sort of bound to what they, to that major, or are they admitted to a specific academic program that they put on their application?
No, we have a single college of liberal arts. When you very first show interest in Ohio Wesleyan, if you indicate a major, part of what that does is help direct us what information may be of interest to you. So it does direct how we follow up to you. So if someone says they're interested in the biological sciences, we'll feature those departments, and we'll try to put you in touch with faculty members and students from that department if we can. Now, we're going to keep asking you about your interests. In fact, I was working today, we're trying to put together an online course for our orientation program for this summer. And again, we will ask you in that course, what do you think you might want to major in? And we'll ask you in that case to tell us, are you really certain? Are you kind of thinking about it, or you do have no idea? And again, those are just kind of snapshots of the moment of what you think you might like. And it helps us determine who to have you work with when you select your courses. So we will have faculty registration guides. Each student will have a one-on-one appointment with a faculty registration guide who will help them select courses. And if a student has said they're interested in pre-med, we'll match them up with a different faculty member than if they say their interest is in the arts. So that's the purpose of it at that point. But none of that is binding. And no students will have declared a major before they come to campus. There is a process for declaring the major, a formal process online. Students have to declare a major by the end of the sophomore year, but not before. And there really aren't advantages to declaring before. So I think I was going to say, and we do have some people who declare and then change their mind and undeclare and declare something else. So that's also a possibility. Although there can be some costs if you wait too long to really figure out what it is that you're most interested in. When students arrive, what we really want students to do is to begin to explore the curriculum. We offer a number of majors that either aren't offered at all in most high schools or are only offered minimally. So you might have had a psychology course in high school, but it's unlikely that you've had multiple psychology courses. And the same with geology and sociology and economics. And very few high schools offer courses in Black World Studies or Women and Gender Studies or Latin American Studies or Middle Eastern Studies. And so I don't think students can really know if that's a good match for them until they've tried it. For the liberal arts, a key component of the liberal arts is to expose students to multiple disciplines. And this has a lot of long-term value. Employers are saying more and more, they want people who can look at big picture problems from a big picture. And that means not just with one specific discipline-specific set of skills, but more broadly with some comprehension of and knowledge from and skills from different interdisciplinary perspectives. So you will be required, no matter what your major, to take courses in the natural sciences, in the social sciences, in literature, in the arts. What am I leaving out? I think that's most of it. To study a foreign language. So there'll be a number of requirements there. And so most students start their first year taking a variety of courses to fulfill those general education requirements. Now, it's really nice if you can use that exploration to begin to figure out what the major should be, what you want to major in. And that's where we'll try to guide you this summer, try to get an idea of what your initial interests are so that you have a springboard or a starting point and can take some courses right away that help you get started. There are a few majors that you really have to start in right away. Pre-med is one. Some students start pre-med the second year. It's possible. That sometimes requires some summer school or even an extra semester if you start later, but it's possible to do that. But it's usually preferable if you want to be pre-med to start in the courses for that curriculum as soon as possible. So if students have an interest there, we will start them in some of the pre-med courses right away. You can always, it's easier to change out of that one than to change in. For some of the performing arts, it's also pretty critical to start right away. So if students have an interest, we'll get them in some of those foundation courses right away to try it out. And again, it's easier to switch out of that if that's not the right match than it is to switch in later.
So this is a very basic question, Dr. Hall, but what is the minimum requirement at OWU? Is it one major? Is it a major and a minor? Is it more than one major? What do students have to do?
One major. That's all that's required. One major and the general education requirements. Our curriculum is set up not with semester hours as our unit of counting how many courses people have taken. Instead, we count units. And most of our full semester courses are one unit. To graduate, students need 34 units. So if you're there 4 years, 8 semesters, that averages out to 4.25 units each semester. And there are some 0.25 unit classes around and some 0.5 unit classes around. So that's not too challenging to accomplish. The general education requirements are difficult to say how many courses are required, in part because one class can fulfill 2 and sometimes even 3 of the requirements. So one requirement is that students are exposed to and show competence in cultural diversity. And many of our literature courses also are cultural diversity courses. Many of our social science courses are also cultural diversity courses. So it's pretty common for students to take a course both that fulfills the diversity requirement and counts as one of the distribution requirements. Students are also required to take the English composition course, called the College Writing Seminar is the appropriate name. And that's to demonstrate some basic skills. A fairly high percentage, I would say maybe as high as 30% of students are exempt from that requirement based on either test scores or they bring in transfer credit when they first come to Ohio Wesleyan. So that's another possibility. But there's this college writing seminar, and then students are required before they graduate to complete 3 more courses that are writing intensive. And students usually get at least one of those, sometimes 2 in their major, but oftentimes a writing intensive course will also be a course that counts another way. So it's hard to say how many total courses for a major plus the gen eds. Majors can run anywhere from 8 to 13 courses, 8 to 13 units. And then the gen eds are counting, I think 15 additional courses if you fulfill each of those requirements with a separate course, which most people don't do. So we're talking about 24 of the 34 courses for a major and gen ed, which leaves rooms for either a minor or 2 minors or another major or just some electives. Those are really available for students to use as they would like. I think there's a very common misconception that students have to do 2 majors, or at least that if they don't do 2 majors, that something will be lacking from their transcript. And that's false. That is absolutely false. The purpose of a major is to help students really get in-depth knowledge in one particular area. We want you to have breadth, which is why we have you take courses in all these different disciplines, but we also want you to have depth. And there's a lot of studies in my area of cognitive psychology showing that some students develop the most intense, the most productive and important critical thinking skills when they have a very in-depth knowledge base. And so that's part of what we want to develop within the major. And the purpose of a major really is to enable students to learn how to gain that in-depth knowledge. So a fairly high percentage of our alumni will start in their first job in an area related to their major. And by the second job, many of them start switching areas. And by the third job, more switch areas. And so we had a number of alumni come back last fall for a speaker series. And most of them spoke to the topic that your major is not your destiny. Your major helps you get started, but it's not your destiny. And so I think a lot of folks believe that 2 majors will qualify them for more jobs, and that's not necessarily the case. And if some students try to do 2 majors and 2 minors, we have people really pursuing some very ambitious combinations. And if you pursue those, but then don't have the opportunity to do some of the really intensive and deep learning experiences within one of the majors, like an internship or a capstone, I think you cheat yourself out of something that's really very valuable. And so if you have a good reason for a second major, you should go for it. But if you're doing a second major just because it seemed like a good idea and you didn't know what else to do, that's not as good a reason. And especially you don't want to do that if it costs you opportunities in your single major to really develop the skills that are most valuable after graduation.
That's great advice. I know we do tend to have a pretty high percentage of students at Ohio Wesleyan who double major, I think hovering around 29%. My sense is that in part because we offer so many majors and so different from some schools that may have half as many options, students realize, oh, you have two things I like. And also I think given the number of students who are now coming into Ohio Wesleyan with college credit from their high school experience,
Yes.
that frees up their schedule a little bit as well to add in that second major.
Our curriculum also,
go ahead.
I was going to add one more point. Our curriculum also adds a lot of flexibility. Some institutions will not allow students to count a course both for general education requirements and for the major, and we do. And so there's a lot of opportunity to double count, and that frees up a lot of time as well. So that makes it easier for students to do a double major. And again, if there's a good reason for it, students should go for it. But they shouldn't do it just because. That's not a good reason.
Sure. You mentioned the distribution or core requirements that we have here. One question I often get is, do you have a math requirement?
We do not have a math requirement. We do have a quantitative reasoning requirement. So we have two general categories of requirements. One are what are called competence requirements. So that's the writing requirements. It's the requirement in foreign language. And part of the competence requirements, there's one requirement in quantitative reasoning. And so students have to demonstrate a certain level of competence. So some students come in foreign language, for example, and will test at a level high enough that they're exempt for foreign language. They do not have to study foreign language any longer. However, if they're that strong at foreign language, then I think that might be something they should pursue. They're showing some aptitude. So there's good reason to think that they should pursue it, especially given the value of being able to speak a second language. The quantitative reasoning requirement, though, can be fulfilled by math courses, but other students fulfill that requirement with an economics course or a chemistry course. Within psychology, I teach a course in psychological statistics. That one also fulfills that requirement. So there are a number of different ways to fulfill that requirement.
Great. You mentioned earlier about meeting with the faculty registration guide during orientation to assist with scheduling your fall semester classes. And I'm wondering, you made reference to the questionnaire that you send out asking what their current academic interest is. So when a student puts undecided on that questionnaire right before orientation, how do you match them with a faculty registration guide? And then how does that guide advise them on what kinds of courses to take? What would a typical first semester schedule look like for an undecided student?
A first semester schedule will not look all that different for someone who's undecided versus someone who knows what they want to major in. So the vast majority of our students try to fulfill their foreign language requirement their first year. Our introductory level courses are numbered 110, and the second level courses are 111, and you have to complete or show competence at the 111 level. So if you did not test out, if you're not exempt, some students will start at the 110 level. Some students will be at the 110 level and will start at 111 level, and they only have to complete one course. But we offer both 110 and 111 levels in the fall, and a lot of students decide to take their foreign language. So you need 4 full unit courses. There's one of them. A fair number of students will also go ahead and take their English composition course in the fall. Almost all students take that first year. Some of them will take it in the spring instead of in the fall, but that's often the second course. So there's 2. And then 2 other courses, we encourage students to take courses in 2 different disciplines. So maybe a social science course and a humanities course, maybe a social science course and an arts course, or a natural science and an arts. But there's a wide variety of courses there. When you get the online orientation course, you'll have options to look through the descriptions and start getting a feel for what looks interesting to you. And basically, it's just a matter of deciding on courses that look like they're worth exploring. Now, if you know what your major is going to be, then typically there's a course that we start you in, the introductory level course, but not in all cases. So another example would be if students have taken AP psychology, for example, and took the exam, and they don't yet have their exam scores. I know exam scores are really odd this year, so I'm relying more on past experience than current experience, I'm afraid. But if you do not yet know if you get credit from AP for the Introduction to Psychology course, there's no real reason you have to take Introduction to Psychology your first semester to be a psychology major. And so we often will tell people, why don't you wait till spring? And then you'll know if you have credit or not. And you can always take Introduction to Psychology in the spring, and you're on track to finish that in 4 years pretty easily. So faculty registration guides have a lot of background and resources to check out the variety of majors, to see what are the recommended first courses for people who want to major in an area. There are some courses that students take if they don't want to major in an area. So we have a lot of natural science courses that are taken by non-majors almost exclusively. And some students who are not real inclined toward the natural sciences want to get that out of the way. And in that case, we'll direct them toward those courses. So if you do not take the freshman or college writing seminar in the fall, then you'll have 3 courses to choose from instead of 2. But the schedule ends up going together pretty quickly. I think more quickly than a lot of students think it might. And I think the most important thing to know is that you do not make a choice for that first semester that, again, sets your destiny. It's not going to set the course of your entire life. It's not even going to set the course of your 4 years at Ohio Wesleyan. But it's a starting point. It's how to get you launched. It's how to help you start exploring the curriculum and finding what's the best match for you.
Great. And the faculty registration guide who works with students during the summer orientation program, is that their academic advisor, or is there potentially a different person that serves as their advisor? And when does that assignment officially happen?
The faculty registration guides are a smaller group of faculty than advisors. We have almost all our faculty are advisors, maybe all, probably all. But they're not all available to be faculty registration guides. So we have a smaller group. They are trained to be a little bit more widely aware of the curriculum. So I know psychology really well. I don't know some of the other disciplines quite so well, but I know enough about the other disciplines to be able to help students get started, even if they're not planning to major in psychology. And so those are the folks who serve as faculty registration guides. A student can request that individual be their advisor, and when we can accommodate that, we will. But we will assign people to advisors later in the summer after the registration process. Students can have a voice in that. One of the questions we'll ask in some of the surveys in this online course is if they have met a particular faculty member they'd like to continue to work with, and we will try to honor those requests as best we can. And many students do elect to try to stay with their faculty registration guide at least for the first semester or so. So you will be assigned a faculty advisor before you get to campus. You will meet that faculty advisor before classes begin. So our schedule has been that students arrive on a Thursday before classes begin the following Wednesday. They go to Camp Owu for a couple days. They come back on Sunday, and then they have Monday and Tuesday to get ready to start class. And part of what happens on that Monday is a meeting with the academic advisor. After students are on campus, they can at any time change their academic advisor. And what typically happens is that students meet someone they've had a class with that they can relate to, who has common interests, who know about internship opportunities that appeal to the student. And so they'll ask that faculty member to become their advisor. And there's a form, an online form that they can use to make the switch. The only thing is that the faculty member has to agree. And the only reason a faculty member will say no is if they already have a large number of advisees. And that's so that they serve all their advisees well. And so I have, in some years when I had large advising loads of students, I can't take you on right now. But I have 8 seniors who are graduating. And once they graduate, I'll have room. So come and talk to me before you register for classes. I'll give you some information, and then we'll go through the process and you can become my advisee. So that's the more common situation if someone cannot take a student on. So most students end up working with an advisor of their choice.
So if I'm coming in undecided, I know you're not as involved in the assigning of them as Dr. Stoll is, for example, but do you know the process? Like, is there some kind of trying to match if I'm an undecided student based on something in my application or my profile?
Yes, Dr. Stoll does the assignments, or he has before. He's retiring June 30th, so he won't be quite as involved this year. But the staff and the Sacred Arc will follow his lead. He reads every folder. So, and by folder, that includes the application for admissions. He reads the essays. He reads the background of the students. The faculty registration guides make notes and say, oh, the student is very interested in pursuing a major in this department, for example. And so he uses all of that information to try to match someone for their first advising experience as best as possible. But students are changing their minds a lot. When we used to do all of these forms on paper on campus after students arrived. And so what we often had happen was students would arrive for the first day of the on-campus orientation program, and we'd ask them, what do you want to major in? And then by the second day, they would have changed their mind. And that's part of the process, and that's part of the fun of the process, is that you can. You learn new information, you hear new things, it's exciting, and so you make a different choice. But it does make it hard for us to match people with an advisor that fits their current choices. So, but I think that's also the value. Most any faculty member can advise a student for the first semester or two. You're not going to run into problems there. And many faculty have unofficial relationships with students. So, for example, if a student has two majors, perhaps a major in English and a major in psychology. I had a student this year who had that combination. I don't know the English major quite so well. I know enough to get students started the first year, but when they're starting to make some more fine-tuned choices about what to do junior and senior year, I'm not as well informed. And so what happens is that they'll find somebody in the English department, and they can either email or go and visit prior to selecting courses for the semester and get some input there, and then they'll come to me for the official advising session, and we'll work out the schedule from there. So a lot of people have the official advisor and then relationships with other faculty who are not the official advisors, but are still providing them with support.
Great. I'm wondering if you can talk about opportunities for students who do come undecided. Are there things like aptitude tests or certain portions of courses that may help them figure out what their major should or could be?
Yeah, there are a lot of different answers to that question. So I'll probably get halfway through this and forget what I'm talking about. Probably the first thing I should tell you about is that the UC 160 class. So all first year students are required to take this UC 160 class, and it's called the OWU experience. And the purpose of the entire class is to make you familiar with, help you become familiar with the opportunities of a liberal arts curriculum at Ohio Wesleyan. The class does a lot of things. It is one of those 0.25 unit courses, which means that it's an academic course. You get a grade in it, and there are academic requirements. You will write papers, but there are fewer of them than there would be for a 1 unit course. Less time in class meetings, less work. But the purpose of the class then is to introduce students again to the Ohio Wesleyan experience, and particularly our signature curricular program, the OWU Connection. And that encompasses all kinds of things. It encompasses opportunities to study abroad for a semester. It encompasses our travel learning classes, internships, both on and off campus. It includes our granting program, what we call the TPG program, for theory to practice grants. And students can write a grant proposal and get funding from the university to do a wide variety of things, many times to travel off campus to explore something, many times to do a research project on campus, etc. So in this course, you learn about those opportunities. And then one of the key activities in the course is to create a 4-year plan. And that's to make sure that you can work in the opportunities that you particularly want to pursue and still graduate on time, which is a key for everybody, right? We're all pursuing that. We actually have, as part of that process, for students to go through and come up with a schedule of what they think they're going to take every semester for all 4 years. Now, nobody follows that plan. That is not the purpose. You do not know first semester of your freshman year what you're going to take final semester of your senior year. In part because hopefully you're going to find when you're in a class something you really love that you want to at least take a second course in, if not pursue a minor or a major in, that you just haven't had an opportunity to find that out yet when you first get to campus. But the purpose of this activity, this planning activity, is to teach students how to plan and teach them how to use particular resources we have on campus, like a software package called Degree Audit. And Degree Audit automatically tells you the courses that you've taken and which requirements it will fulfill. And it has some forecasting functions that are called what if. And so you can look at what you've already selected to do, and you can say, well, what if I add a major in chemistry? Or what if I add a major in the fine arts? And then that will tell you what additional requirements you need. What if I take these courses this semester? So there's a lot of modeling there. It's a really powerful, useful tool, and that can help you get a feel for what's possible and what's not possible. As part of that plan too, we really encourage students to start thinking about the co-curriculum and how you want to fit that in. So if you're an athlete and you want to be the captain of a team at a particular point in time, that may not be the semester for you to take organic chemistry. That's one of the more challenging classes on campus. And so we want you to think of that in advance. You plan how to blend those kinds of things to make the most of the co-curriculum as well. So that's one class, and that class will present you with some opportunities to begin to think about how to find your major. That's one answer. Second answer would be the Sagan Academic Resource Center. The Sagan Academic Resource Center, when students go there to get support in terms of their writing skills, their quantitative reasoning skills, just general academic skills. Many times the tutors that work there will have students take a standardized test called the LASSI. And the LASSI helps students identify their study skills, their approaches to studies, and what's working and what's not working so well, and their aptitudes and their habits and what motivates them. So it's a really interesting, all-encompassing assessment, and that could give some insights that can sometimes be useful for deciding what to pursue as a major. And then the third resource that's available is the Career Connection. We used to call that Career Services. That's the older, old-fashioned name. Megan Ellis is our director of the Career Connection. She doesn't like that name, and I understand why. And part of the reason why is that we're trying to infuse this notion of developing a vocation, some life goals of what you want to achieve from the beginning. And so you are likely to be introduced to the Career Connection in UC 160 in that first class. They have a wide variety of tools to help students, including some standardized tests to help you identify your strengths, others to help you identify, again, aptitudes and interests, and help you match those with possible careers. They have all kinds of internship and externship programs that allow students to start getting experiences, not senior year, but certainly by sophomore year, to start exploring some things to decide what does seem to be a good fit and what doesn't seem to be a good fit post-graduation. And that can help guide you toward one major over another. So there's a lot of resources on campus, and I think the greater challenge for students is to know where to go when.
Those are all great suggestions for sure. And I'm guessing too that the student's academic advisor would be a key person in helping them to decide or suggest particular courses, maybe given their strengths or their interests, to help them decide whether or not that major might be right. Perfect.
Yes.
I'm wondering if, Dr. Hall, if you can talk at all about, is there an opportunity to create your own major at Ohio Wesleyan? And if so, how common do you think that is, and what's the process involved if a student wanted to do that?
It is possible. It's pretty rare, but it does happen. We have a major that's now a permanent part of our curriculum, the major in planetary sciences, that actually resulted from a student creating that for their self. I don't remember the student particularly, but was one that was especially interesting to more than one student. The challenge of creating your own major is that we have particular curricular goals, particular learning goals we want a major to serve. And part of what that means is that the student needs to get depth. So typically when students try to develop a new major, that means that they're going to want to go across disciplines, right? If you're staying within the discipline of psychology, the major's already there. If you want a new major like planetary science, that involves some geology, it involves some biology, it involves some chemistry. So it went across several different departments, different disciplines. And when you start bringing in all these different disciplines, then what often happens is that you're taking a lot of introductory level classes. And the purpose of a major is to get that depth, to get to the advanced classes. And so it can be done to develop a new major. Typically, a student who wants to do that will work with a faculty member who will advise them to help them come up with a coherent reason to take a particular blend of courses and to get that balance of advanced and introductory level classes. But it's not going to be approved just because a student says, gosh, this sounds like fun. There has to be a well-reasoned rationale and it has to meet those curricular goals.
Great, thank you. I was also thinking about how students could utilize the elements of the OU connection to tap into maybe areas that they're specifically interested in that we may not have a major in. I was thinking about somebody like, I think Olivia Baylor was her name. She was a fine arts major who really wanted to do animation, which we don't offer as a major, but was able to take advantage of the OU connection to do an internship experience at UCLA's animation program. Do you have other examples, Linda, that you can think of students who've done those kinds of things through the OU connection?
I don't approve those connection grants, so I'm not as familiar with those. I know that a lot of the OU connection experiences, though, do help students see what's possible off campus, out in the real world. So one that was particularly meaningful for me is that I advised one of our spring break service week trips. So we have spring break interfaith service teams. And that particular one was designed by students. We went to Atlanta. They had done coursework about healthcare and mental health care, and they wanted to explore healthcare and mental health care for women of color in the inner city. So they found a number of service agencies that we went and visited and worked with. And they saw a number of people that were running these agencies, some that they had created themselves, some that were branches of national organizations, and could really see how to take their major and apply it in very, very interesting ways. What I remember is that on those teams, one of the traditions is that we come back in the evening and we spend time reflecting on the day and what we learned. And when I first agreed to be an advisor for this team, I thought, oh, well, that'll take 15 minutes. And I was wrong. The students really engage in that, really find it meaningful. It's the highlight of the trip for a lot of the students. And so we often have to stop it after an hour and a half because we're getting tired, but could have gone on longer. But what I remember is time and time again, a student saying, I could see myself doing that. I could see myself doing that. And so being able to have those off-campus experiences and just getting a feel for the possibilities and the opportunities that are out there really help. One of the things I like to try to emphasize to students is I'm afraid that an awful lot of our culture pressures students in high school to come up with lists of credentials. So you want to say, I was captain of this, and I was in this club, and I did that, and I was on this team, and I had this GPA, and I got this award, and on and on and on, and your list goes on. And the difficulty is that those lists don't get you started in a job very well. When people want you to put a resume, they don't want a multi-page resume. They want it succinct, and they want it to really highlight the things that you have done that are most important. So you're going from not a list that's valued because it's long, but a list that is quality. And even if that resume gets your foot in the door, then you've got to explain. You've got to tell your story or provide your narrative to explain not just what you did, but why it was important, what you gained from it, and why it makes you a good match for the job or the graduate school that you want to go to. And so that requires time and thought about what is meaningful, what is useful, what is productive from what you've experienced. And I think that a lot of our OU Connection experiences really provide the opportunity for students to do some of that in a very deep way. And that helps prepare students then to make those connections later on when they're trying to move on and get the next level of opportunity.
That's such great advice. I think oftentimes too, those experiences, even if they help you figure out what you don't want to do, are just as valuable as those experiences that help you figure out what you do want to do.
Absolutely.
Dr. Hall, you mentioned earlier in our conversation a little bit about this, but one of our questions that came in ahead of time was, how important is the name of the major for a potential employer for sort of life after OU? You know, does it matter all the time what your major is called, or even what your major is as far as what you do after OU?
I think it does, but I think it does less than people expect. Liberal arts colleges are not the norm. There are many more graduates from large state schools that are not liberal arts colleges. And that means when you try to get your next opportunity, the odds that you'll be interviewed by someone who did not come from a liberal arts college is pretty high. And that puts some of the onus of explaining the value of the education on the applicant, on our graduates. And that's something of a challenge. But the value of the liberal arts are these general, widely applicable skills. And they are not necessarily, in fact, they aren't limited to any one major. The ability to think creatively, the ability to communicate clearly, the ability to think critically and analytically, all of those skills are really what employers tell us over and over and over again that they want. But that's more difficult to articulate in some cases. Another way to think about this is that a liberal arts education is about these general skills. It's a general education. And in contrast, my go-to example is a school that trains you for one specific career. So if a student wants to be a welder, they should go to welding school. That is the best education that will prepare students to be a welder. That gives the particular skills. And that means when the student is done with welding school, it's really clear which jobs that individual is and is not qualified for. They get particular certifications that they can do particular things that qualify them for particular jobs. And so getting their foot in the door and getting that first job is a little easier. The disadvantage of that education is that if things change, they're not qualified to do much else in many cases. It's going to be harder for them to be qualified to do much else. So they're very well qualified for that one job. They were trained for that one job. But if they lose interest, if the economy changes, then adaptation is more difficult. The people who are best prepared to adapt are liberal arts graduates. And that's shown in all kinds of research that shows that liberal arts graduates it's absolutely true, have a more difficult time getting that first job. But then they go farther. They do a lot better in the long run. So that comes back to your question, I think, in that part of getting your foot in the door is being able to present yourself in a way that's going to allow people to understand that you are a good fit for what they want. And that's where our staff in the Career Connection are just fabulous at helping students present themselves well. But if you look at a resume, typically what people have at the top is their objective and some key qualities that describe them. Who are they? And they're more than a major. There's somebody who has particular passions. There's somebody who has particular strengths. That's going to count for a lot. That's going to be what catches people's attention. And if you can back that up with, and this is how I acquired this in my major, and this is how I tried it out and practiced it in my internship, et cetera, then you've got a good story to tell. And I think that really is going to matter later on. Now, you know full well that people have some stereotypes about certain majors. You hear jokes about certain majors. Part of what's interesting, though, is that those stereotypes are often very wrong. So I heard a really interesting presentation last fall by a man, and I'm afraid I'm going to really mispronounce his name, Ilan Norbach, I think his name is. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon and in robotics. So he was talking about robotics and changes in the job market. And part of what he pointed out, for example, is one of the stereotypes right now is that if you want job security, you should be in a STEM field. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, math. Everybody should go STEM. And he pointed out that the jobs that are being automated at the fastest rate are STEM jobs. The jobs that are difficult to automate are the ones the English majors are prepared for. And that's kind of an interesting perspective. It's not our stereotype. STEM jobs are great. So I'm not talking about STEM jobs. I'm just saying I think this notion that there's automatic job security if you have a particular major is a dangerous one. Another speaker that I heard at another conference, Jeff Salingo, wanted to give him credit, talked about the fact that another area in which people have assumed that they would have a lot of job security is in accounting. And a lot of accounting jobs are being automated. But what he pointed out is that does not mean that accounting jobs are bad jobs, that you should avoid accounting. What it does mean is that liberal arts graduates in accounting are better prepared because they can do accounting plus. They can do the accounting plus they can communicate the results. They can do accounting plus they can relate to people who run arts organizations because they know something about the arts, etc. And so I really think it's less a matter of what your major is, it's more a matter of what you can do and how you can explain what you can do.
Such great advice. We're nearing the end of our time together. I'll remind our audience that we have a couple more minutes for questions if you want to pose one before we close. But I wonder, Dr. Hall, if there's, I don't know, a piece of advice or words of wisdom that you might suggest for the folks out there who are undecided and nervous about it. Anything that you can, and you've got a long history of perspective on this, and may have seen lots of success stories as well. So what advice or words of wisdom would you give?
I would say that I think the students who are at the greatest disadvantage when they come to college are not the undecided students. They're the students who commit too early. They come in and say, this is what I want and I know what I want and I'm going to go this path, and are very rigid about it, and then suddenly get fairly far along in their education and realize they were wrong. That's a more difficult switch by far. Being undecided is, if anything, an advantage. It means that you're coming in open to the possibilities and can, from your experiences, make an informed decision about what's the best major for you. So know that it is a strength, that you're coming in prepared to take advantage of the best of what we offer, find what is the best match for you, and I hope we'll really enjoy that.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Hall, thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is a busy time, again, with your finals grading due soon. And so we appreciate the time that you spent with us. And I know that the insight and advice that you've provided has been super helpful for our audience. Thank you, audience, for also participating. I'll do a couple of quick reminders. We, knowing that we are not yet back on campus and able to accept visitors in person, we are moving forward with a full complement of Bishop Plus sessions throughout the month of May. So every Tuesday in May are called Teaching Tuesdays, and we have faculty members offering mock classes. So even though our semester is over and our faculty are getting ready to enjoy some perhaps rest and relaxation, they are still interested in offering these mock classes. And so I would encourage you students to check out the listing again every Tuesday. Those are offered at 4 o'clock, and each Tuesday there are at least 4 options to choose from, and they do vary each Tuesday. And then every Wednesday and Thursday, we have a different Bishop Plus topic offered. Those sessions are either at 6 or 7. Typically, the Thursday sessions have an academic focus area. So, for example, next Thursday is on the arts at Ohio Wesleyan. We'll have one on psychology at Ohio Wesleyan and one on education. And then the Wednesday topics are more generalized. So last evening, there was one on athletics. I think we'll have one, an alumni panel. There will be a session on more details of the career connection that Dr. Hall was mentioning, as well as a more in-depth session on studying away, so whether abroad or domestically. I will also mention that all of these sessions are being recorded and posted on our website. So if there's one that you aren't able to attend live, you can access those on our website after the fact and watch them at your leisure. So those are some great opportunities to stay connected with Ohio Wesleyan virtually until we have the opportunity to see you in person. And we also offer our virtual tour on campus. There's an opportunity to make your own customized view book. We are always happy to have you engage with the admissions staff in video conference calls, good old telephone calls, email communication, whatnot. So please don't hesitate to reach out whenever it is you may have questions that we can assist with throughout this process, whether you're an incoming freshman next year or you're just starting the process. So thank you again for joining us this evening. Thanks again, Dr. Hall, for being with us, and enjoy this beautiful evening. Take care.
Thank you.